So now we're going to talk about ionic compounds and their properties. So what we're going to keep coming back to is that solids lab and the physical properties we saw at the macro scale. So ionic compounds are going to be kind of grouped together based on these physical properties. So first off, ionic compounds are called salts. It's a generic term that you might hear used. Again, you don't need to necessarily know this, but if you're looking at outside resources, they sometimes mention ionic compounds are called salts. All ionic compounds are what we call soluble in water. So they will all dissolve in water without any problem. So soluble, another word you could write down is dissolve in water. All ionic compounds conduct electricity when dissolved in water, or another way you could call it is molten. Okay. All molten means is that it is partially melted, so it has some movement to it. So it's a little less than a solid, but it's definitely not a pure liquid. So you might hear a term called molten. Ionic compounds, if you melt them a little bit, they will conduct. They will conduct, but they will not conduct in solid form. They have extremely high melting points, extremely high. And that is because of Coulomb law, okay, which you did some practice with that worksheet. So Coulomb's law, again, the attractive force between a positive and a negative, that's a very strong force. So it's going to be very difficult for that to kind of break apart. So you would have to put in a lot of energy in order to change it from a solid to a liquid. So there might have been some solids from the solids lab that didn't quite melt. And that is, again, going to be how you're going to tie the solids lab to all of these different properties. All ionic compounds are solids at room temperature. That won't really help us with the solids lab because all of them were solids to begin with. And just as a definition, ionic solids themselves arrange themselves in what they call a crystal structure. And so it's a repeating pattern over and over again, and they have different shapes associated with it, but just think of it as a cube. So these cations and anions keep repeating in a positive negative fashion that you will watch a video on that will kind of give you some insight into how the positive and negatives interact.